Lynette White was always on the embankment. Whatever the weather, whatever time of year it was, there you would see Lynette White.
Lynette was my friend, a very good friend of mine. She was young and vibrant and beautiful. She was like bright and bubbly. She was like one of the boys. I miss her so much, you know, I do.
20-year-old Lynette White was found brutally stabbed to death on St. Valentine's Day. A mutilated body was discovered at this flat in the docks area of Cardiff.
When Lynette's body was discovered, detectives were appalled by the savagery of the attack. She'd been stabbed more than 50 times, her throat cut almost from ear to ear.
Lynette was just such a lovely person. So young. She had a whole life ahead of her.
Lynette's death was horrific. Her body was found hacked, slashed and stabbed almost beyond recognition in a flat above a betting shop in Butte Town in Cardiff.
People outside the docks, they didn't like Butte Town.
Docks was a very hard area to police.
It shook that community, and people wanted answers.
Everyone wanted to know who killed Lynette.
I knew Lynette from school. We were together through high school for approximately 5 years. She had this smile that when she smiled, she had dimples on both the sides. She was very shy, quiet girl. Tended to keep herself to herself. She was never in any trouble in school. I grew up in the Rumley area of Cardiff, as did Lynette. We didn't live that far apart. Rumley was a lovely place to live in. It was somewhere where you could leave your doors open. It was safe. Everybody knew everyone. Butte Town was actually known as a very rough area. It's definitely somewhere that you wouldn't want to walk at night by yourself. I remember passing through there when I was younger with my father in the car, and you would have the girls lined up on the streets. And I remember thinking to myself, how can they do that to themselves? But then I don't think a lot of sex workers have got a choice. It's not what they want to do. It's what they had to do just to get by.
Well, my name's Tim Rogers, and in the late 1980s, I was a radio reporter working in Cardiff. I was interested in telling the story of child prostitution because we suspected it was going on, but very little was said about it at the time. And I spoke to Lynette White, who at the time was the most visible prostitute in Cardiff, who was always on her beat at Riverside, on the embankment in Cardiff. Whatever the weather, whatever time of year it was, day and night, there you would see Lynette White. We seemed to get on, and we got into a conversation. We spoke for about an hour or so, and she told me something of her life. I thought at the time how old she looked for her age. A very sad encounter. Very bedraggled figure. I'd never thought of prostitution as being much of a career choice, so this was, life had imposed this upon her. She left school without any qualifications. She needed to make money. And so she sold all that she had. and that was the cell.
My name is Rashid Omar. My full name is Harun al-Rashid Muhammad Ali Omar. It's more like a title than a name. I was born in Cardiff, Tiger Bay. Cardiff born, Cardiff bred, never lived nowhere else. And yeah, Lynette was my friend, a very good friend of mine. She had to leave home because she was having trouble in the house, so she had to get out of there. And I think she wanted to be a nursery nurse. I can't remember what it was, nurse or midwife. I can't remember what it was specifically, but you know, she explained to me, you know. But then I was like, you know, blown away. You know, she said, like, she's like, "I'll be doing this now, everybody, for you know the next year. I've got to do what I got to do so I can be financially stable, blah blah blah, so I can get back to doing so I want to get my place." You know, geez Louise, how like circumstances can determine the situation you're in. No matter who you are or where you come from, you could be beautiful, you could be intelligent, whatever. Circumstances sometimes force you into situations, and that's where she was, in a forced situation. She wasn't there by choice. The prostitute, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. No, she was a struggling, stressed out girl with problems, dealing with the problems, the only way she knew how.
She had an aura of sadness about her. Others say that, you know, she could be fun and she could be lively, but the person I met seemed like a shell of a human being. Certainly not a 20-year-old girl who'd, you know, got all her life before her. It was as if she'd lived that life many times over and looked at me through tired eyes. It was a grim, dangerous, exhausting life. She knew she was at rock bottom, trying to survive. And she knew that she was vulnerable. And she knew that she was at risk.
I couldn't get my mind around it, you know? And to think that could happen to her, because it was so brutal, it was very, 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 very traumatizing for the whole community.
It's not to say that there wasn't violence in Butte Town, that bad things didn't happen in Butte Town. Bad things happened in many other communities. But this was on a different level.
I came to Cardiff back in 1976 originally as a DJ, playing in the local clubs like Casablanca and blues parties and the likes afterwards. And I found a welcoming that was unusual. I suppose you could say it was a family community. Everybody knew everybody. People kept their doors open late into the night. And I fell in love with the city.
It was, you know, poor, but really an amazingly tight-knit, welcoming community.
I was born in Cardiff in the docks. It's a good community. And we all get on really good, you know.
Can't think of a better place to live than here. From whatever country, whatever religion, whatever nationality, we all live in this tiny little area.
You know, there's a lot of Somalis, Portuguese, Polish, Asian, Arabs, Yemenis, everything. You name it, we got it.
A lot of seamen back in the day used to come to Cardiff, jump ship, marry a local girl, and live here, stay here in the docks area.
People of all different ethnicities came to live together as one, and they lived together quite peacefully.
People outside the docks, they didn't like Butte Town. They didn't even like coming down here, you know. They used to think it was too dangerous, too many black people down here, too much trouble.
It's not to say that there wasn't violence in Butte Town, that bad things didn't happen in Butte Town. Bad things happened in many other communities. But this was on a different level.
When Lynette's body was discovered, detectives were appalled by the savagery of the attack. She'd been stabbed more than 50 times, her throat cut almost from ear to ear.
It's a particularly brutal murder of a young female, and we are asking the public to come forward and let us know if they have seen this girl between last Tuesday and last night, so that we can piece her movements together.
When that story first broke, it was a real shock horror, and it was one of those out-of-place type of things. You couldn't imagine that it would happen in a place like that.
It seemed almost as if it was playing up to people's received ideas of what life was like in the docks.
We couldn't believe it, you know, because like things like this don't happen, you know, in our community, you know. And then after we found out it was Lynette, you know, I was just like devastated. Like I couldn't get my mind around it, you know.
I remember seeing that image of Lynette at the news of her murder, and that very distinctive permed hair that she had, and realizing that that was the girl that I'd interviewed and I'd spoken to. Yes, it was profoundly shocking.
She'd been stabbed, as it turned out, something like 58 times.
It wasn't a murder, it was an eradication. It was an obliteration.
It took me back, it took my breath away, that something like that ferocity, that brutality. I mean, a young girl murdered and almost slaughtered, you know, stabbed over 50-something odd times, you know. That's a brutal, sadistic, violent murder.
I remember seeing the news about Lynette on TV. It just sent a shiver down my spine, and I just said, oh my God, I was in school with her. I can't believe it. I just don't know how anybody would want to hurt Lynette.
It was shocking, it was disturbing. It shook that community, and people wanted answers.
I knew from the beginning that there wouldn't be nobody from the community would have done anything like this.
Murders were few and far between in South Wales at that time, and mercifully they are to this day. So any murder, regardless of the circumstances, attracted a lot of attention. This was something that really people found very disturbing. And they demanded answers. They wanted to know, who's done this? You've got to find the killer.
When a woman's murdered, you know, the first person you look at is always going to be the partner. Sadly, women tend to be murdered by their partners. So the first person the police wanted to interview was Stephen Miller.
Lynette's boyfriend, Stephen Miller, you know, we called him Pineapple because of the way he used to wear his hair. You know, he used to wear his hair up like that, and they come like you know, like the leaves of a pineapple. He was just like quirky, you know, out there, bouncy, you know, young, you know, little Cockney guy. You know what I mean? Just doing his thing, harmless. He was like a mellow, how can I say it? Slightly immature for his age type guy. Do you know what I mean? Happened to strike out lucky and meet Lynette.
Stephen Miller was interviewed, and the police were satisfied with the explanations he gave, and therefore it would appear at the first part he was no longer a suspect.
So the police let him go, and and moved on to look for other suspects.
Information was coming in, certainly in the early stages of the investigation, quite rapidly.
As ever with a murder case, there were sightings. A young girl said she'd seen a man sitting near the flat, you know, who appeared to be bleeding, so that was a suspect.
I know they were looking for someone who was seen in the street or in the area with blood on his hands, distressed in James Street, and the photo fit was done.
Is this the man who inflicted horrific injuries on the 20-year-old 8 days ago? Police think that if he isn't the man who actually wielded the blade countless times, he certainly knows something about it.
The police did come up with a photo fit of a Mr. X, which was a white man, possibly in their 30s, but fairly typical looking. It wasn't, wasn't the kind of picture that made anyone think, oh, I know who that is. But it was a starting point.
The chief detective at the time went on Crime Watch, and that was put out to the public for identification. And that was, a big focus.
The police are now mounting a huge hunt, talking to everyone in the Dockland area.
We're conducting house-to-house inquiries. Can we come in and have a chat?
Yeah. Police say they've been keeping an open mind on a motive for the multiple stabbing. The prostitute disappeared on Tuesday last week. Police want to know her movements between then and Sunday.
We still, despite all the masses of information that we have, we don't know where Lynette stayed from the Tuesday to the Sunday.
Lynette left her room on the Tuesday before last Sunday. Where she lived in that time and with whom are, say the police, keys to solving the murder.
The anxiety in the community increased. Have we got someone in our midst here who's capable of doing that? Why haven't they been found yet?
A large number of detectives are out there taking statements. That's all going back into the incident room. And they were looking at things like, because of the prostitution element, curb crawlers. So those people were interviewed, and they came from far and wide, to be honest with you. So it was a massive inquiry, thousands of statements being taken. You had the forensics still going on. Obviously, the main amount of blood, the majority of the blood, came from Lynette, but there was some foreign blood found at the scene.
And none of the people that the potential Mr. X's matched the blood, so they were all ruled out, one after another. After a while, it became more and more clear that they actually had no idea, who had done it, and no serious leads.
This was a case that went on and on and on, and there didn't seem to be any obvious answer to this one. And clearly the pressure would have built up around those who were investigating that case.
Police are not getting anywhere near who has committed this crime. The investigation seemed to be going nowhere. And then the police had a tremendous breakthrough. A new witness came forward.
Just when the case was getting very cold, a woman called Violet Perriam came forward as a possible witness. She was a receptionist in the Butte Town Health Centre, and she remembered that she'd been driving by the murder flat around 1 in the morning on the night in question, and she remembered she'd seen 4 men standing around on the street, and she thought that one of them might have been a man called John Actie. She only saw him from behind, but she knew him from the health centre, and she thought that's who it was. Now, the name of John Actie was one that immediately interested the police, who knew him very well. John Actie back then was quite a presence. He was a big guy, big personality. He was, 6 foot plus, bullet-headed. He'd been an ex-rugby player, and you could really imagine he could have been a great rugby player. He would work doors, he would do debt collecting, but the police suspected that there was a lot more to him than that. They suspected him of really being Butte Town's #1 gangster, if you like. And they were forever trying to bust him. And more often than not, John had managed to walk free. Then, just a few weeks later, in a separate, completely unrelated incident, the police took a blood sample from a prostitute called Angela Pasila, and to everyone's astonishment, it turned out that her blood sample appeared to match the blood that had been found in the murder room, the blood that was presumed to be that of the murderer. So, of course, they hauled Angela Pasila in for an interview, and she gave a very incoherent statement, but she named a whole lot of people as having been somehow involved. And several of those people were well known to the Butte Town police. And at this point, the case took a whole new direction. The case switched from Mr. X to being a conspiracy of between sort of 5 and 7 men.
The police had 9 months of groundwork, and they were able to make arrests and interview them.
They were 5 black men from the Cardiff docks, and it was, you know, an awful end, but thank God for that.
And after that, all those stories tweets with fucking crazy man start fighting stabbing. You know what I mean?
Anybody thinks police are stupid, are stupid. Because they're not. They know exactly what's going down.
1988 was a good time in my life. I settled down, I just had a baby girl. No, I wasn't getting into no trouble at that time. Life was just moving on without any problems. On Friday, the 9th of December, 1988, I heard bang, 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 bang on my door. 6 o'clock in the morning.
Bang, 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 bang. Please open the door. I got nothing on. Drunk as they come.
I looked out the window and there's 5, 6 coppers. I said, what do you want?
So I opened the door, naked. Police jumps on me. Are you Anthony Parrish? Yeah. Why? What's wrong? What's going on?
John, you need to come to the police station. So what for?
We're arresting you on suspicion of murder. I said, murder? Who's dead? Then they said to me, Lynette White.
It's to do with the Lynette White murder.
Arrests were made of Yusuf Abdullahi, Stephen Miller, Ronnie Actie, John Actie, and Tony Paris. So they were then all interviewed in relation to committing this horrific murder.
When the police announced that they'd arrested 5 men from Butte Town, I was relieved. I thought the girl who I'd spoken to might finally now get justice.
So once the police had arrested the 5 individuals, they needed to corroborate the witnesses' accounts.
You're in a police station with coppers who was determined to lock us up. They wanted to lock me up, especially.
There was 4 of them. 2 good guys, 2 bad guys. And so the 2 bad ones like banging tables and raising their voices. And you keep telling them the same thing. You don't know nothing. Well, then they come with some statements from Leanne and Angela.
2 girls, a girl called Leanne Vilde and Angela Pasila.
You know Angela Pasila? Yeah, I know that. Do I know Leanne Vilde? And I'll say, yeah, I know that. Well, she said that you were there. She'd seen you there.
These people that put you there, they're telling me I was in a flat. I was involved in a killing of Lynette White. I don't even know these people. Maybe he was drugged up. Drugged up so bad, and I realised someone's being stabbed 50 or 70 times. Well, we don't know, John. I said, well, I do. I wasn't drugged up because I wasn't there.
I know where I was, and that wasn't with them. I was in a Casablanca.
And that's what I told them exactly, where I was, Casablanca, working on the door.
One of the nightclubs in the docks area was the Casablanca Club. The police knew that the 5 individuals visited there and knew each other from that.
The firm I was working for at that time had a call to say that Tony Paris had been arrested in relation to the Lynette White murder. I had dealt with Tony on a number of occasions, so I knew him very well.
I used to do a bit of shoplifting in my community. I knew everybody's sizes and stuff. Like everybody, you got to survive somehow. You know, you got to put food on the table. I got arrested twice, I think. No aggro, didn't give me no trouble, no aggro. I just pleaded guilty.
It was shocking to find Tony charged with so serious offence. I think when you work in a criminal practice, you frequently are shocked by what people are capable of.
And one or two of the guys in the group had a hard reputation in Cardiff, so a couple of the names were not surprising to people.
I've known John Ackley for a long time. I had met him through work. His father died while he was still young, and he was somebody from the age of 14 that was getting into trouble.
Well, John wasn't my cup of tea. John had a bad reputation and a bad name. Where he goes in the night and what he does, he does. As far as John and Ronnie's concerned, they want to nick them anyway, because they just don't like the acting. So, just to get them off the street.
My cousin Ronnie, Ronnie Ackley, he was a stand-up strong guy, man. He'd help you out. Ronnie was a, fiery guy, he didn't take no messing off no one.
Yusuf Abdullah, he had a Welsh mother and Somali father. He'd grown up partly in Butte Town. He was, frankly, an angry man. He got into fights. He was a complex character. He'd also, for instance, for a while, tried to work as a jockey and ended up coming back to Cardiff. At the time of the murder, he was actually working a straight job on a boat in Barry, doing general kind of labour and maintenance jobs.
Stephen Miller would be a prime suspect for this, because very often these sort of crimes are committed by people who know the victim. And so it wasn't a surprise to find him arrested.
The police theory was that Stephen Miller, who'd been looking for Lynette White for several days, had finally caught up with her and then had gathered together some of his mates to teach her a lesson which had got out of hand.
Being interviewed is a nightmare. Every second you're in that police station, it just gets worse and worse and worse. You've been in there 4 days, they're telling you this, you're telling them that. You can't sleep, you can't eat, you got headache, banging, 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 migraine, but they just kept on. They was wearing you down, you was tired, disoriented, and they're saying you was there with this guy and you're thinking, was he there? You are thinking that. I'm looking at Ronnie, Tony, Miller, and Yusuf, yeah? So I'm looking at them thinking, have they done it?
You're trying to work out who said what, well, where was you, when this was, and then the police are putting questions to you, and you're trying to work out who's told on you. Come back in, fling pictures on the table of her in the postmortem, on the slab. I put it off the table. I didn't want that in my head, but it is in my head because I saw it. And I can't get it out of my head. And he said, think of yourself, no, Tone. Think of yourself. Tell some shit on the other boys. That's what they want. That was scary.
So they really focused in on Stephen Miller because, of course, Stephen was the one most, emotionally close to Lynette White. I guess they believed that there would be a good chance of getting him to tell them the truth, finally. This was the police's one chance. Up to this point, all they had was really very circumstantial witness statements. They needed one of the 5 to confess, and that was Stephen Miller.
You hold the key to this inquiry, or we're going to have the truth out of you.
What do you mean, I hold the key?
You know
I don't
you were
hold nothing,
there.
because I was not there.
Stephen, you were there.
All 5 defendants had been interrogated for a number of days. All were denying any involvement in this murder. And then, quite shockingly, we were then told that Stephen Miller had confessed to the murder.
And I think Leanne came in. She started shouting. She said something to somebody. As far as I could recollect, she said something to somebody. She ran out. And after that, all I saw was tweets with fucking crazy man. So I started stabbing. You know what I mean?
And nobody could believe what had happened.
We were in the room. John Acty's just walked past. He's seen this knife, you think?
Yeah.
Do you think that's what scared him? That's why he's going?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah, positive.
When they come and told me Stephen Miller had said I was there, I was like, you know, what? What are you on about? You've told him to say that. No, we haven't. He's being interviewed, John. He wanted to get it off his chest. Well, I wasn't there. Why are you doing this to me? I was just in shock. I was just completely lost. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, you know, was he there?
He comes in with another bit of paper in his hand, flashing it around. Well, we've got a statement from Stephen Miller. And he says that he was there and you was there and attacking Lynette.
But you know, your head's so messed up. Until the paperwork comes in, you're like, God almighty, God almighty. And then I was charged.
Stephen Miller's confession was the decider. The police now felt they had enough to charge the 5 men with murder.
While the CID was all standing there with grins on their face, smiling. They had the charge sheet. You have been charged within the 13th and the 14th of February, 1988, that you did murder Lynette White.
The police were convinced that they had the right people. They felt they would have successful convictions against all of them.
Once you've got someone admitting something and got the witness statements as well, this case is quite strong and going before the courts.
Following the charges being made, the 5 men were held on remand for nearly a year before the trial began.
You know, we was in big trouble. We was on a murder charge, yeah? Then they sent us to Swansea, which was even worse. We're all black. There was a white girl who got killed. Swansea is white.
When they opened this trial, the prosecutor put to the jury in his opening, you're going to see people that come from a totally different background. People in the docks area carried knives just as easily as you might wear your coat. To try and paint the picture of the people in that area all being violent criminals.
The police was putting the accusation to me that we went to the flat. I was outside. Lynette was screaming. Leanne Vilde, Angela Passola, heard the screaming in their flat. Run across the road. I'm supposed to be standing in the flat at the top of the landing.
And they're supposed to have run past John Acty on the stairs, which is not going to happen.
I'm like 6'2", 15 stone, security. Pushed me out of the way. Yeah, like I wasn't even there. Went in the room.
Angela Passola says when she went through the door into the room, she sees Lynette fighting with me on this mattress, and I'm supposed to be scolding her. But Leanne says, when she went through the door, Lynette's already dead on a mattress, now stabbing a corpse. They should have seen the same thing, but they don't. It's so obvious, they didn't see it.
Angela Pasila, her statement led to the two men who lived upstairs from the murder flat, Mark Gromek and Paul Atkins.
They said on the night of the murder, they heard a knock on their door, they come down, answered the door, and they answered the door to Della and Ronnie.
And he don't see me, a little black guy with glasses, and he don't see John.
No, they didn't even identify me in the area.
The evidence of the witnesses was inconsistent.
There were obvious reasons why that might have happened, because it had been quite some while since the murder.
You know, that was their case. There was no other case, no forensic, no DNA, no nothing.
It's a little bit like a roller coaster, because everything we tried to do to exclude evidence that was unfair, the judge was finding in their favour. We get to the end of 6 months of evidence, and the judge is about to sum up to the jury the following day. We just couldn't believe it.
All I'm thinking, I've got to go home because I haven't done nothing, but it doesn't mean that you are going to go home.
I'm thinking, they're not going to get convicted, I'm going to go home.
It gets to the point where, you know, you come into the end of the trial. You've got everyone's summing up is started, and then, lo and behold, the judge dies. Heart attack.
The judge had died, and there was going to have to be a retrial. It was as if we were back at the beginning. They were devastated.
The first trial took 5 months. After the second trial, which should have been quicker, took longer.
So at the end of the second trial...
Where do you want me?
The verdicts came in.
We all went into court. Jury convicted Stephen. Found Yusuf guilty.
I cannot tell you why he was convicted. I was convinced all along that he would be acquitted of this crime.
I was downstairs waiting to go up. Jury acquitted Ronnie. They asked the jury how they found the defendant, John Arthur Actie. He said not guilty.
Innocent! Innocent! My feelings, I am bitter, I am broke. I want to go home to my family.
When the verdicts came back, Ronnie and John were found not guilty.
Then it was my name up next. I'm thinking I'm going home.
Tony Paris was a shoplifter. He was somebody committing petty crime. Never anything violent prior to these allegations.
and they found him guilty.
When they found me guilty, I just froze. Held on to the bars, and I froze.
They got him as the main man in this whole scenario.
I'm going to the scrubs for murder of a white girl, 50-odd stab wounds, throat cut, wrist cut. You're going to be in trouble. Whether they throw you off the landing, throw boiling water, all this stuff. It frightens me thinking about it.
The three convicted men, Yusuf Abdullahi, Tony Paris and Stephen Miller, all had criminal records, but all three deny they're murderers.
What do you feel about the fact that 3 people are still inside?
Terrible. There's still 3 guys in custody for this crime. Well, they never committed.
Why do you think you were brought in for the crime if you didn't commit it?
Well, the police brought me into the crime, you know. No one else. It's only the police that fabricated the whole story.
A number of journalists started to hear doubts about the conviction. There just seemed to be too many questions. The test in a criminal court is guilty only if that can be proved beyond reasonable doubt. And there were doubts.
The more I read about the case, the more, particular elements of it started to concern me. How could it be that 5 men had been charged and 3 men had been convicted of a murder when none of their blood was in the murder site, while somebody else's blood was there in profusion?
The difficulty I think that this investigation had was the place where this murder took place. People don't want to tell you everything about their lives because they think that the police would use that against them.
What was the relationship like between the local police and Butte Town back in 1988?
Terrible. They're driving past you and calling you names, and then you got confrontation with them, so the hatred and the anger just builds up between you. You know, picking on you, locking you up for things you haven't even done. They just wanted to sort personal vendettas out in the area against black people.
There was no forensic evidence linking any of the defendants with the murder.
The more damage they had me doing, the more obvious it was that it should be forensics. My hair, my skin, my blood, it should be all over the place, but it ain't. So what am I, a ghost?
A handprint and a rare sample of blood point to the existence of someone who is yet to be identified.
When this photo fit was released, I didn't recognise this individual, and anybody I spoke to didn't recognise this individual. It was an image of a young white man who was sat down on the steps with blood on his hands.
Where's this 6-foot fair-haired white guy? How are they going to get around that? I am not 6 foot and I am not white.
The killer was still out there and could have committed a similar act again.
I didn't kill Lynette White, yeah? I wasn't there, I know nothing about it. Tony never killed Lynette White. Ronnie never killed Lynette White. Stephen never killed. Yusuf Abdullah, he never killed. So if we didn't kill her, who did?
These are the 3 men who've become known as the Cardiff Three. Yusuf Abdullahi, Stephen Miller and Anthony Paris are all 1 year into a life sentence for the murder of a young prostitute. Lynette White died in the Butte Town flat where she met her clients. She was the victim of a brutal attack that left her body with countless stab wounds.
could have happened to anyone. People didn't feel safe for a long time after a murder. I thought they had the right people for Lynette's murder. I knew of them and they did have a reputation. So when the names come out, I really thought the police had done the job.
When a murder like this is apparently solved, people want to believe in it. They want to feel that the danger has been taken off the streets. I think there was a general feeling that the Cardiff three were not sympathetic victims. You know, they weren't nice, upstanding citizens.
All were denying any involvement in this murder. Obviously, there were 5 people charged. But Ronnie and John were found not guilty.
My feelings, I am bitter, I am broke. I want to go home to my family.
How convinced are you that the 3 people still inside are innocent?
The police are looking for a white man. You know what I mean? From day one, you know, they showed us on Crime Watch that they were looking for a white man. So therefore, that convinces me that they're innocent without even going into the evidence.
Doubt started to emerge about the conviction that wouldn't go away.
It should be forensics. My hair, my skin, my blood, you know, it should be all over the place, but it ain't. So what am I, a ghost?
None of the forensic evidence found at Lynette White's flat relates to the defendants. A handprint and a rare sample of blood point to the existence of someone who is yet to be identified.
If you're black and you're from the docks, then you've got no chance.
They just wanted to sort personal vendettas out in the area against black people. They had the opportunity to lock us up, and that's what they done.
I can remember sitting at my home in London and looking at a newspaper article telling the story of the Lynette White murder and the convictions. And I could just remember reading the names and I thought, oh, that's a lot of nonsense. But when I saw Tony's name, that's the one that stood out for me. When I think of Tony, I think of a short, little podgy, part-time shoplifter. He was a ladies' man, he loved to chatter. He was a lovable character as well because he didn't cause any trouble.
I can remember telling my sister that I was going to work with scrubs, and I'd never been in jail. I was so scared, it's just not real. Little black guy from Wales, going to an English jail, there's going to be trouble.
I love my family. Oh yeah, me and Tony was very close, very deeply close. I knew what he was thinking before he thought it. And when this thing happened with Tony, it was devastating. Because as far as I'm concerned, they did this to him when he didn't do anything.
It immediately drove me to leave London and come back to Cardiff. With the sole intention of getting involved with whatever needed to be done in order to help support this.
The next day, after the guilty, we'd a public meeting in the community centre.
And we was all talking, and I said, what are we going to do now? Well, we got a campaign.
I didn't know nothing really about running a campaign like this. But this is your brother's life.
The campaign had a lot of work to do. There were still plenty of people who believed that the police had got the right men.
We quite quickly got ourselves into a very active movement. The Reverend Al Sharpton, he was a big civil rights campaigner, a major activist, a big player in the world of Black Power marches.
He is the man who will make everybody come and put their cameras and their mics in our faces. And he done exactly that. Al Sharpton done exactly that. He stepped off the plane like that. Free the Cardiff 3.
The controversial Al Sharpton has long campaigned for black rights. To his supporters, he's a saviour, a champion of civil liberties.
I am disturbed about the issue of justice, people of color around the world. The Cardiff 3 case, I'll be going to Wales tomorrow to march. It seems like all over the Western world there is not the capacity to take the rights and the humanity of black people seriously.
It's only a matter of time before you go to court and you're going or you're staying.
Over a period of a number of years, I have appeared in cases known generally as miscarriage of justice cases. The first thing you have to do is be acquainted with, what's gone wrong. And there was no scientific evidence that connected Miller or any of the others to the scene. And there's plenty left there. There's blood all over the place. I then look at the interviews in this case.
Stephen Miller's confession was the decider.
I think everybody thought he's confessed, he's done it.
Stephen Miller was the boyfriend of Lynette White, so he would always be a suspect.
All sorts of motives may come to mind, but none of them fit. So I don't think it's Stephen. Why would he do this?
Gradually, over the course of the interviews, Stephen Miller began to confess that he had indeed been involved in the murder of his girlfriend, and he'd been helped in that murder by the other 4 men.
Listening to the tape, I was so shocked by what I heard. I thought that I can't really believe that any appeal court judge will listen to this and not be moved and not be horrified by what they hear.
We borrowed a minibus and a whole pile of us went down to support during the appeal.
The appeal began with Michael Mansfield. He went straight for the Stephen Miller interview tapes.
You saw Tony Paris
stab Lynette
at least 15 times.
The moment they started playing the tapes in court, you could, literally hear a pin drop.
And you didn't stop him?
I tried to stop him, but he came to me.
This was all novel for the Court of Appeal to actually hear an interview.
And not just hearing it in its entirety, in its full.
She's now been stabbed on the floor. He's threatened you with a knife.
Yeah.
What happened then? You're saying he kept on stabbing
Yeah.
Lynette as she lay on the ground?
Yeah.
If you're involved, you must tell us the truth.
I'm not involved. I'm telling you that. I'm not involved.
Well, why should somebody put you there?
I don't know. I've been telling you over and over. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know what they put me in it for.
Once you start playing the tapes, the crucial ones, you are mesmerized, almost transfixed by the nature of the questioning.
They could lock me up for 50 billion years. I said I was not there.
Because you don't want to be there.
No, I was not
You don't want to be there.
I was not there.
As soon as you say that you're there, you know you're involved.
I was not there.
You feel yourself involved in the pressure of an interview room in which these officers are just assaulting you mentally. And you go, wait a minute, what is really going on here?
You know you were involved in it.
Involved and I wasn't there.
Yes, you were there.
I was not there.
It's probably one of the most harrowing things that I've ever heard. The way that they were questioning, the way that they were taunting him, terrorizing him.
And you were there at the head of that, on the window, looking over your so-called girlfriend that you cared for. You didn't care a tuppenny for her.
Why do people confess? Stephen Miller, IQ of a person of 11, so he's very vulnerable. He was faced with allegations of a brutal murder of somebody he knew very well and with whom he had an obvious connection. The police themselves had constructed a case which they were determined to bring home.
You hold the key to this inquiry, or we're going to have the truth out of you.
I hold the key.
You know
I don't
you
know
were
nothing
there.
because I was not there.
These interviews took place over 4 days, and there were 19 interviews occupying 13 hours. Now, that's a lot of time. When you feel there's no way out, in the end, I can understand why people capitulate.
Miller's barrister, Mansfield, for 2.5 days was talking this case. And at the end of that, he sat down. There was no case.
Basically, the Lord Chief Justice stopped the appeal once he heard the tapes. That was it.
After 4 years in prison, they walked free from the High Court to the cheers of their supporters. The case collapsed after the 3 appeal court judges criticised the way police carried out interviews with one of the men, Stephen Miller.
The pressure they put on me in the police station, didn't want to know what I have to say. As far as they were concerned, they had the right person.
We were just used as scapegoats for the police who couldn't find anything else or anybody else to put this crime on.
The police can't do their job, and something's got to be done about it. They're taking liberty with innocent people's lives.
I've been locked up for 4 years. And to be the open, sky is there. Whoosh. They've done it. They're free. And then when you get home, go to the lounge, and the lights goes on, poof. That's why I say the police picked on the wrong family to rope into this thing.
I am the most happiest woman in the world.
The eruption of joy about the homecoming. But of course, when that dies down, then what? The questions still hang in the air. If these men didn't do it, who did?
In the red light district where Lynette White once worked, Cardiff prostitutes continue to ply their trade. Many are now worried that their former colleague's killer may still be at large.
You can't get back to the life you had before you went in jail, because now it's all different ballgame. You know, you got that murderer attached to you. You know, he was lucky, he got off. You mention my name, it's Lynette White.
When I heard that the men had been released, I still felt that they had done it. I felt the police had done what they had to do and they had this proper conviction. It just felt like there was no justice for Lynette.
Being released on the strength of Stephen Miller's tape doesn't automatically convince everybody that they didn't do it. It just says that there's a technicality in the interviewing techniques of the police on one particular individual.
I think that the officers were there to get at the truth, and that is what their duty was. In some instances, some people have to be shouted at, some people have to be spoken to quietly. That is the way interviews go.
The police refused to reopen the investigation, which completely implied that, as far as they were concerned, the Cardiff Three were still guilty. I mean, for years afterwards, suspicion just didn't go away because there was no attempt to find out who really killed Lynette White. Lynette's father, Terry, was convinced that they were actually guilty. It was almost impossible for them to move on.
One night I was sitting in my house watching the TV, I heard bang, bang, bang on the door. So I've gone into the kitchen, looked out the window, and I seen Lynette White's father with a shotgun pointing at the door. So I'm looking through the kitchen, and he's calling me saying, John, John, but he got a shotgun like that. He got a big sheepskin coat on, and he got a shotgun pointing at my front door. If I would have opened that door, when I found out they was doing a new investigation into finding the killer, I thought, oh, great, you know what I mean? But we got South Wales Police investigating it. We can't trust them.
I was the Deputy Senior Investigating Officer on the re-investigation into the Lynette White murder inquiry.
In 1999, I was appointed as the Senior Investigating Officer of the re-investigation of the Lynette White murder case.
South Wales Police were under pressure because there were a number of miscarriages of justice being portrayed in the media.
Why have you actually decided to do this major review?
Well, it's our intention here in South Wales Police to review all outstanding, undetected and unresolved murders.
The Lynette White murder investigation became the first one that South Wales Police decided to look at. I think there was a lot of myths around this murder. Nobody had got a clear picture of what had gone on.
It was very pressurised to take on this job. How do we do an investigation that the public would look at and say, that's ethical, it's transparent, and we trust those officers doing it. This team has to be squeaky clean. There's no shadows in this one. We'd got all the exhibits together in one place. There was 900 of them. And on a weekend, we went through that. There was no evidence. There was one sighting of one of the persons at the scene, possibly. No forensic evidence there. The witnesses were questionable. For me, the evidence wasn't there.
With the new technology in DNA, if evidence is there to be obtained, then we will obtain that evidence.
What you want as your perfect crime scene for a murder to be detected, you want it inside, you want plenty of blood. It was inside with plenty of blood. Then why the hell haven't we got any more forensic?
I've been a forensic scientist for a very long time, specialising in cold case investigations. The police, first of all, asked us if we would review the work done in the original forensic investigation.
We went to the scene one night, into the flat, to get a picture of what it would have looked like on the night of the murder.
So we were looking at the blood patterns, particularly in the main bedroom where Lynette was killed. The key thing in this case was that it looked as though the offender had been injured themselves during the attack and had left some of their own blood behind. What we were looking for was some more of this foreign blood to get a DNA profile out of it.
We had masses of photographs of all the exhibits and the crime scene, and we'd look through them. I was in the room when a conversation was said, "What's that on the floor?" You've got the cardboard box, and on the floor was a cigarette wrapping. Have we got it? And of course we had it. Have we examined it? No, we haven't.
There was quite a lot of blood staining on it, but this mostly was smeared. But there was one single stain on it that represented a spot that could conceivably have come from the offender. So this became known as Cellophane Man.
We were now on a real hunt. We were getting somewhere. You had to focus on getting the profile.
We were pretty desperate to find some more of this foreign blood. We decided that the skirting board would be a good place to go. Usefully, the skirting board hadn't fitted the wall very well. There was a little gap behind it, and some of the blood just happened to have landed on the top of that gap and dripped down. This gave us the full profile for Cellophane Man.
Here we are now, 14 years after the brutal murder of Lynette White, and we had a DNA profile. It was a massive breakthrough. It was incredible. Never had that feeling like that before. We had our eyes on the killer.
Using an independent forensic company, South Wales Police has broken new ground in forensic work, which has yielded a number of DNA profiles. One particular male profile is of significant interest to the investigating team. The male is believed to be directly involved in the murder.
So obviously the first thing that we were asked to do was to check it against the Cardiff 3.
Mr. Paris has come forward, volunteered to give his DNA this morning.
I said, yeah, I'll take that, the test, but I've taken it in my solicitors.
The sample that's been taken will go directly to an independent forensic scientist. I will accompany that sample from this office, and so this sample will never be in the police station.
It's the only way I was doing it. Scared of the police, messing with it. They done their test. Come back negative. As far as I was concerned, that was it.
But we knew it wasn't. So it ruled out all those individuals who'd been arrested before.
There's only one thing you can get better than that, and that's to get the right person.
One of the first things that the police did there was to organise a mass screen of people living in the local community. And none of them matched the profile that we'd got, so that wasn't any good.
One of the team put forward this issue as far as familiar DNA, where you can cross-reference to families and look at a particular individual from the family.
There might be someone on the database who's related to the person who's, left this blood.
Eventually, that sharpens the investigation to only around 600 matches in the particular area. I'm thinking, hold on, we're going to get him. 600, we'll get him. And this is where we focus then on comparing the DNA against particular individuals. And we hit on a family, and a family matched it in nearly every feature.
And one of these profiles stood out head and shoulders above the other as being much closer to Cellophane Man.
14-year-old juvenile offender. And I thought, wow, what's going on here now? Clearly, he wasn't the person who committed this murder.
Then the police started looking at his family. First of all, they looked at his mother, but it didn't match. They looked at his father's profile.
What we did was to interview that gentleman and taken his DNA.
And it was close, very close, but it didn't match.
The 1 minute you're on the ceiling, next minute you're on the floor. It's like a roller coaster.
Then we were told that there was one member of the family who was estranged from them. There was an uncle. We tried to track him down so that we could take a DNA sample from him. He had hidden himself away in a small village 15 miles outside of Cardiff. Little contact with anybody, no contact with his own family. He was a recluse. That was Jeffrey Gafford. So 2 officers went out to speak to him. When they asked him for his DNA sample, he gave it, but he'd like to tell us that he had sex with Lynette White days before she got murdered. So that started to ring alarm bells. The officers come back to me with the DNA sample, so we race that sample up so that it can be tested. And I suppose we were thinking at that time that this looks like a very good lead on what we've got.
Once I'd got that information from the lab, then the first thing I did obviously is call Brent Parry and give him the news.
The phone call saying that we had the match 100%, that we were matching that DNA, that we had the killer, that was massive. This was the killer of Lynette White.
It was like main line coming through the veins. You know, we thought we got him. So straight away, I'm thinking past him, we've got him, now how do we convict him? How do we make sure we tie this up right and do it properly?
We were going to arrest him on the Tuesday morning, so we put a surveillance team on him on that Friday afternoon and watched him from the time he was in work.
It must have been late that I came home, I told my wife, went out to get a bottle of wine, we sat down, sort of a lovely feeling it was of we've achieved something.
I went home that evening, and a short while afterwards I had a phone call from the surveillance officers telling me that Jeffrey Gafford had been to a number of different shops and he's bought paracetamol. That was ringing alarm bells.
I remember saying, well, he's either got a terrible headache or he's going to do something really silly.
The decision was made to send the surveillance team into the house, and they didn't get no response.
So I said we need to get in there with the firearms teams.
So they broke the door down, they found him inside.
It was clear that Jeffrey Gafford had taken an overdose. We were determined that he wasn't going to evade justice again. He'd done it before, he wasn't going to get away with it this time. An ambulance was called and Jeffrey Gafford was taken to hospital in the ambulance. And I was told that he'd made a confession to the ambulance operators in relation to his responsibility for Lynette White's death.
He said that he'd been waiting 15 years for this and he deserved to be punished.
I was living in Cardiff when the huge breakthrough finally came. It was an extraordinary thing to hear on the local news that a man had finally been arrested following a DNA match.
One day, I walked down the road to go to the shop, and I could hear one of the boys calling me, waving the newspaper. I could hear them. They got him, Tone, they got him, Tone.
And when you saw the first picture of him, he was an exact composite of the photo fit that was generated 15 years prior.
He was released from hospital, and we were able to take him straight to the police station.
Please state your full name and date of birth.
Jeffrey Charles Gafford, 28th of the 5th, 65.
I was quite hopeful once he'd made that initial admission that he would now accept some responsibility for his actions as well as the crime and as well as all the suffering he put everybody else through.
The reason for this interview is because you have been arrested for the murder of Lynette White.
We were confident that we could convict Gaffur. We had an airtight case, and the evidence was overwhelming and compelling.
Now detectives have done something to atone for a terrible wrong which put 3 innocent men in prison by putting the real killer, Jeffrey Gaffur, behind bars.
Oh my God, it was the... Oh, Jesus God. Oh my God, I didn't think I'd cry so much. It was the best feeling ever. Ever. To be vindicated.
It's so hard to explain the feeling that finally everybody, unless you're born on Mars, knows it was nothing to do with you, just like you said in the first place. This guy done it.
I remember seeing it on the news. They showed a picture of Gaffur. He looked cold. I can remember just looking into his eyes on TV, thinking to myself, how could you have kept quiet for so long? I couldn't help feeling for the men who were being wrongly convicted.
It was like one of them bittersweet moments, you know, because I was happy, but I was bitter, you know, that he took Lynette's life. I was still more upset about her dying than him being nicked. I think that all the lives this guy ruined, do you know what I mean? Because he ruined lives, this Gaffur, you know what I mean?
Words cannot express the impact that Lynette's death has had on our family and the torment we've been through over the past 15 years. We miss Lynette every day.
Having looked at everything, there is no doubt now that Jeffrey Gaffur is solely responsible for the murder of Lynette White and that no one else was involved. This was Jeffrey Gaffur and Jeffrey Gaffur alone.
Even after we'd arrested Jeffrey Gaffur, and he was absolutely banged to rights, there was still those, both inside and outside the police in Cardiff, with deeply rooted views that the ones who were arrested originally had done it. Even when we had nicked him, an inspector came on to me, he said, "Oh, well done, Kev." He said, "Great job." But the actors were involved, weren't they? Yeah.
You know, the police didn't care, you know what I mean? They knew we never done it, but they wanted people to think we'd done it.
So when I heard that the officers had been charged over their part in the evidence and the making of the statements and the interviewing of Stephen Miller, I thought maybe we'd get justice.
What about the way the police behaved in that original case, and what about the police now? Shouldn't they get to the bottom of this?
Well, all I'm prepared to say at the moment is there should be a public inquiry into the original investigation, so that the truth can finally come out. 2 men spent 2 years in custody. 3 men spent 4 years in custody. And I don't think it is good enough to say it's simply sorted out now.
I was glad, you know, that it was arresting these coppers. Solicitors saying to us, the evidence we got is unbelievable. You're looking at them and you think, Jesus God almighty.
This is Jeffrey Gaffur. He confessed to murdering Lynette White in her flat in Cardiff in 1988. But in those intervening 15 years, police had pursued and wrongly convicted 3 others for the murder. 8 of those detectives who've gone on trial for conspiring to fabricate and manipulate a case against innocent men.
When I heard that the officers finally had been charged and were going to be going to court, I thought maybe we will see some justice.
We got the police charged with various things, and we had to go to court in Swansea to give evidence against the police.
I was traumatised, yeah, definitely re-traumatised. Back all over the same stuff all over again.
The former officer's defence the court has heard is that Lynette White's murder may not have been down to just one man.
Even after Geoffrey Gaffour had confessed to the murder, there were still some elements of the police who had been involved in the original case who refused to accept it.
It's like I was back on trial again. I was supposed to be a witness.
They cross-examined us more than they cross-examined them about us being there in the flat. How can that be?
Counsel for one ex-detective inspector today repeatedly asked the convicted killer Gaffour if he'd been pressured to keep quiet about others. He told the court the murder was down to him and him alone.
They're barristers saying we was there with Gaffour. Come on now.
I said, John, it's blatantly clear what they've done. The whole country knows what they've done to us. How could they not be found guilty?
I just knew whatever ever happened, these coppers are not going to get convicted anyway. Do you know what I mean? No matter what happens, you know, they'll get out of it in one way or another, and that's what they've done.
Talking rubbish about some statement you're not supposed to have made, yet they can't find them. Oh, it's just so stupid, I can't even... It hurts my head to try and work it out.
The case against the officers collapsed amid claims that they too had been fitted up by a failure to disclose documents to the defence.
You know, lost the paperwork, case dismissed, and that was it.
All kind of charges they were on, and it got shut out. The case was stopped.
The prosecution threw in the towel. The accused walked. Millions of pounds had been spent, and the biggest police corruption trial in decades never made it to a jury to decide on innocence or guilt.
That trial just stopped because the prosecution had lost evidence that was then, once the case was thrown out, recovered.
Late this afternoon, the Independent Police Complaints Commission announced the documents said to have been destroyed have now been found in the care of South Wales Police.
I thought it gave me a little bit of hope of the British justice legal system. It really gave me hope that, yeah, there is something happening here. Somebody is listening. Now, it's kaput. I have no faith. No faith.
I was no angel. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't no angel where I had no criminal conviction. I want people to know this. Do you know what I mean? But police messed up my life. They messed up my family's life.
There's no doubt that what happened to the Cardiff Five happened because of who they were, the colour of their skin, and where they came from. It could have happened anywhere, but it didn't. It happened here in Butte Town.
The memory of Lynette White should affect us all. This didn't happen in the 19th century or the 18th century. It happened in the 20th century and really goes through the 21st century. In other words, this is contemporary. It's not history.
2 of the original defendants have since died at a young age. But the 3 remaining all have terrible, terrible health problems, trauma as a result of this. It's ongoing throughout that 30 years. It just never ended.
It took me away. He wants people to think that I could be involved in something as gruesome as what I went to jail for. And that falls on my father's head. It was everything to me, my old man. We were like brothers. As far as I'm concerned, my father died of a broken heart. Simple as that.
33 years later, I'm angry, I'm broken, I'm still traumatised. I'll always be angry over the treatment dealt with me, how I was dealt with, how they walked away, no one was punished. So yeah, for all these years, I've been bitter and I'm still bitter, and I'm going to be bitter for the rest of my life.
There's so much injustice in this story. There's a danger of, losing sight of the first and crucial victim in this whole case, which is Lynette White herself.
That's exactly how I remember it. Still with the dimples, the freckles, and the short, wavy hair. Oh, bless her. Pretty girl, had her whole life ahead of her, which was just cut short. Such a waste of a life.
And if you or someone you know has been affected by any of the issues raised in this programme, please go to channel5.com/helplines for information and support. Coming up, we join the team as a busy shift begins in Barnsley's bustling A&E. Casualty 24/7, every second counts, is next.